Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to make the game Pong, or at least a version of it, a modified version of it for App Inventor, where you're just dragging a paddle along the bottom of the screen and you just get points for as long as you can keep the ball up in the air and not hitting the bottom of the screen. So there isn't really an opponent paddle, the ball's just going to bounce off all of the walls. So the first thing you'll need to do is set up a design window so that the design window has a canvas, and on that canvas you'll have a ball and an image sprite. And the image sprite will be just some sort of long thin rectangle, or something, some other image that would work well as a Pong paddle. And then for buttons inside, buttons and labels will go inside a horizontal arrangement. You'll need a label for the score, a start button to start the game, and a reset button to reset the score and reset the ball back to its starting position. So to make this work, the blocks you'll need to add, we'll need to automate the ball movement. We'll need to have controls so that the player can control the paddle. We'll have to handle collisions between the ball and the paddle. We'll have to handle what happens when the ball reaches edges, depending on what edge it is, and we'll have to keep score. So I'm just going to get started by creating a procedure called start game. And that's what's going to sort of set everything in motion. So first, I'll create a new procedure. I'll call it start game. And what I want this to do is get the ball moving. So I'm going to set ball 1 dot heading to true. Set ball 1 dot heading to a random integer. I don't know why I wanted to set it to true. I want to set it to a random integer. I don't want it to be too random. I want it to go vaguely down. And the downward heading is 270. So I want it to be a range of numbers that includes 270. So instead of exactly 270, I'll choose a range of numbers, something like 225 to 315. So it's randomized, but it includes 270. So it'll go roughly in the downward direction. I also want to set the ball speed and I'll start it at 5. That might have to change, but for now I'll start it at 5. Right, and so that's good enough for now to get the ball moving. So now I have this start button, and when the start button is clicked, I'm going to call this procedure start game. So the next thing I'm going to do, because right now the ball might move, but it won't be very effective. If I start the game, make sure my ball is enabled. Started off not enabled. Okay, so you see the ball moves, but it doesn't actually move very effectively for a Pong game because it's not bouncing off the edges. So handling edges will be the next thing to do. So what I'll do is under ball, I'll get an edge reached block. When ball 1.edge reached, I'm going to need an if else, because there will be a condition for when the ball reaches a certain edge, and that'll be the bottom edge. If the ball reaches the bottom edge, what's going to happen is the game is over. But for every other edge, we just want it to bounce off of the edge. So we'll have to have a special case for when the ball reaches the bottom edge, and then an else to catch every other case, which is just every other edge where the ball will bounce. So if we get an equal sign, if the edge that the ball hits equals -1, then what I want this to do is just set that label. So label .text to say game over, because the game's over. You missed the ball. And I'll also set, oh, I need to get rid of that. I don't need that one, I need the ball. I'm also going to set the ball speed to 0, because if the game ends, I don't need the ball bouncing around anymore. That'll be one indication that the game is over, the ball stops moving. So if it hits the bottom edge, that's edge -1, the game's over because you missed the ball. For every other edge, we just want the ball to bounce. So I'm going to go to ball. There's a bounce function built in here. So call ball1.bounce. And then I need to set the edge that is bouncing off of. It's just the edge that you're currently using. So, the edge that the ball, or the edge, yeah, I mean, like the edge that you're currently working with inside this block, whatever edge it happens to hit. So if the ball hits any edge other than edge -1, it's going to bounce off of that edge. So now let's look back at our game. Restart it. I'm gonna have to tell the ball to go to a specific spot at the beginning, because right now I think it would work, but we don't have a way to reset the ball. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill out my button reset. So I have my button reset. I'll go to when button reset.click. I'm going to tell the ball where to go. So I'm going to set ball X. And our screen is, well, we could choose a specific number. Our screen is probably about 300 pixels wide, so yeah, I'll just go with 150, about halfway. And then I'll also set ball Y. Pretty close to the top, so just a little bit off of 0. I'll go with 50. I'm also going to set ball speed to 0, because when the game is reset, I don't want the ball to be going yet. That's what the start button is supposed to do. So reset, the ball resets to the top. When I click start, the ball starts moving. When it hits the bottom, it's game over. So another feature we're going to need is for there to be just to be able to use the paddle. You notice the ball moved, and when you couldn't really do anything. The ball just kind of went past the paddle and nothing happened. You couldn't even move it yet. So the next thing to do will be to get blocks for the image sprite, and it'll be image sprite dot dragged. So when the image sprite is dragged, when that paddle is dragged, we just want it to follow. Follow wherever you drag it, only along the x-axis. It should stay where it is on the y-axis. So really, we just need for image sprite set x to current x of whatever the x value is when you're dragging it. So now, right, it should be possible to drag the image sprite. Now the ball doesn't bounce yet, so that's the next thing we should probably take care of, is what happens when the ball collides with something. So back with ball. When ball collided with, if it collides with some other object, in this case there's only one other object. There are no other objects besides the ball and the paddle. So if the ball collides with another object, we know it's the paddle. So just going to have it, we don't have to have an if statement to check what happened, to check what it collided with. We can just have it bounce. In this case, we can't use the bounce, we can't call this bounce procedure here because this only works for edges. So we'll just have to do our own, figure out our own bounce. And that's going to use the ball's heading. So ball. Grab the wrong block here. I will just change that to heading, and I'm going to set the heading to the to 180 degrees. Well, there's a few different ways you could do it. I really just want the ball. I could make it turn 180 degrees and make it 180 degrees from where it came from. Except I think I kind of want to introduce some randomness to this, because if I don't, the ball bouncing could actually get pretty predictable. So what I'm going to do is I'll actually get a random integer block. And I know up is 90, so I just want it to go close to 90, but not, some random range that includes 90. So I'll just say random integer between 70 and 110. We'll see how that works out. And also, while I'm here, I should probably start dealing with score. Well, score is what I'm going to have to deal with next, but let's just see how this works. Make sure it bounces. Yeah, so the ball bounces off the paddle. All right, so right now I'm not doing anything to keep score. So before I can keep score at all, I'm going to need a variable for score. So I'll initialize a global variable, score. I'm going to set that to 0. Now, so far, the only thing we've really done that's even had anything to do with the score is we've set up the ability to display the score, well, not even really. We just used that label that will normally hold the score to show a message game over. But normally, in every situation other than when the game ends, it's just going to be displaying the score. So first, really what we're going to need to do is set up another procedure. So set a procedure called update score. And the update score procedure is going to set global score to global score plus 1. Or, now that I think about it, we're going to have to use this in more than one situation. I don't think this variable should actually be setting score to score plus 1. This should just be displaying score. So I think what I'll do is I will have this happen. I'm going to set global score to itself plus 1 when the collision happens, because that's when I want to increase the score. And then call update score and update score is just going to handle the label. So label score dot text will be set to a combination of the text score colon space and variable score. And then the reason I have those all grouped together in a procedure, it's just simpler to read. And then I can just I can reuse this as well. So there's another situation where I want to update the score, and that is going to be at the beginning of the game. Let's see, when the reset button is clicked, but also at the beginning of the game. So two different situations. First of all, when the reset button is clicked, I want to set global score, in this case to 0, and call update score. And then when the game is initialized, when the whole thing is initialized, I also want to set global score to 0 and update score. So I'm going to go to screen 1, and when screen 1 is initialized, I'll do the same thing. Well, when screen 1 is initialized, I suppose since all of this reset stuff happens, I really could make a procedure out of this. Reset. Make a reset procedure. And call reset when the reset button is pressed, but also call reset when the screen is initialized. Okay, so let's see how our game works now. So when you reset, the score is set to 0. The ball hits the paddle. It bounces. And when you hit the ball, the score goes up. Now this game's a little too simple, right? So one way to make the game a little bit more difficult, so it's a little more challenging and more fun to play, would be to have the ball get faster as the game goes on. So what I'm going to do is when collision happens, I'm going to set the score but I'm also going to set the ball speed at the same time. So when there's a collision, not only will I change the heading, but I'll also set the speed to itself +1. Now, because I'm changing the speed throughout the game, reset is also going to have to reset the speed, right? Because otherwise, from game to game, the speed would actually stay the same as when you left it last. So, what I'm going to need to do is also add this set speed to the reset procedure. Oh, it's already there. So I guess it's fine. Set ball speed to 0 was already in the procedure. So I don't need to add that. Never mind. It should work just fine. So let me start the game. As I get more points, the game should actually get harder because the ball, every time the ball hits the paddle, its speed will actually increase. So it might not be too difficult now, but as I keep playing, the speed should keep going up. And as the speed goes up, the game gets more difficult. And you can see the ball's already going faster. And once I miss the ball, it's game over. If I want to start again, I can reset it. I can start again. So that's all there is. That's a simple one-player Pong game.